Hey, folks.
Hey, hey.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you guys, so fair warning, my computer is having a conniption this morning and has just like shut down on me multiple times, which is a great time for that. If worst comes to worst, do you guys know how to share Zoom video? Can I tell you really quickly just so we have a backup plan?
Sure. I'm pretty sure I know how to do it, but yeah, run through it again.
Yeah, it's super easy. So I will, and I want to test something anyway. So here's, let's see. Okay. Are you seeing McCree's presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wait, I have to do it again. Sorry, I forgot to share sound. Okay. So you see his presentation?
Mm-hmm.
My name is McCree Anderson, and I'm the director of our fire restoration program.
Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Is it quiet?
No, it sounded fine to me.
Okay, let me try one more time and see if I can mute myself or if I need to keep my audio on. So wave at me or something if the audio goes away.
Okay.
Here in Arkansas, and the lead on our fire learning network. You know, we've been working in this landscape for over 20 years to expand.
You're muted right now.
Was the audio on the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That should be fine. So if worst comes to worst, all of the presentations are in that box folder, and all you have to do is share screen like usual, but just
You have to share audio too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Like I said, hopefully it's done whatever its problem has been too. So
right. My computer actually has had some glitchiness this morning too.
I wonder if it's a TNC server thing or something.
It may be.
Hey, Randy.
How's it going?
Good. We'll wait until McCree is on to go over just last minute logistics reminders, but I think we should be pretty set. There he is. Hey, McCree.
Hey guys, sorry. How are you?
Good.
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm good.
So I will tell you and Randy what I just told Gabe and Jim. My computer is in a very bad mood today and has just shut down on me a couple times. So worst comes to worst, Gabe knows how to share the video. They're all in that box folder. It should be fine. I hope that because I'm saying this, it will behave itself. But all of the videos are in that box folder. It's just a matter of sharing screen and making sure you click the share sound box when you do. Again, like if worst comes to worst, I'll join from my phone so I can at least like chat box with you or talk if I need to. But again, hopefully like it's been a good hour and it hasn't shut down on me. So I'm hoping whatever went wrong, it's out of its system by now, but we'll see.
Okay.
So just to check, you weren't gonna really say anything in between the videos. You were just gonna kind of run them in that order that you said.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And then once everyone's video has gone, I will, and you won't have to do any of the panel moderation because like
Gotcha.
again, afterwards I can talk.
Right.
So So yeah,
Okay.
it would just be that. And I wasn't going to pause in between the presentations. I want to make sure we have time. We got actually quite a few questions through the registration. I don't know how
Oh,
many of those
wow.
folks will show up, because I know McCree said it's a good birthday, but I want to make sure we
Okay.
have time for those. So I wasn't going to pause in between the presentations unless y'all have things that you really, I don't know, unless you want me to, I guess.
No, let's just go on to the Q&A. Just run through the presentations. Quick.
Yeah, I agree.
Sweet.
Okay.
So yeah, I will do, like I said, quick, like 2-minute welcome, and then I will run through the presentations, and then we'll move on to the panel. And like I said, we've got about like 7 or so questions from registration I'll try and cover. And then if we've got folks on that ask other questions, that's great. If not, I've got some. And with 5 of you or 4 of you and 7 questions even, that, you know, probably takes some time. So
Do you have the ability to share those questions with us right now?
sure.
That way we can take a look at them and be thinking about them a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll just put them in the chat box really quick.
Perfect.
And a couple of these I think you talk about in the presentations, like season of burn for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe others, but
Okay. Is there any other housekeeping from, hey, Randy, hey, Jim, that we need to do or that I missed in relation to the flow or anything like that? I think I'm good as long as everybody's good and ready to go. I think what I'm hearing is we're going to play it. If it all falls apart, Gabe, you're going to pick up the ball and run to the touchdown.
Hopefully.
And then at the end, we'll all stand in the end zone and field questions.
pretty much. Yep.
Good.
Yeah. And I won't, unless a question is like very directly, like someone's like, hey, Jim, could you answer? I'll just let y'all have it. And whoever wants to respond, go ahead, and I'll make sure that, you know, other folks have time to chime in on all of that. But I'm not necessarily planning to kind of go down the line and be like, Jim, what do you have to say? Gabe, what do you have to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Just also an FYI, you know, from a national perspective, this was rolled out nationally, right, Laurel, for through the FLN and Forest Service partners. So regardless of if we have really low attendance, regardless, I think the model for this webinar is like how the CFLR program operates, is that they put this will be recorded and it's put on their library docket for webinars. So just FYI, that's how that it will be recorded for a library of webinars for the FLN. So
yep. Yeah. And I'll send you once I'm automatically recording it because then I can't have an option to forget. So I'll trim down the video and send it to y'all also so you can have it and share it as you like. You're muted, McCree.
sorry, I accidentally did that. So if Gabe, are you gonna pick up the recording if she jumps off? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's recording to the cloud. So
I see.
that shouldn't matter whether or not I'm on.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's already set up to record it no matter what.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm good. Thank you for doing it, Laura.
Yeah, happy to do it. And hopefully it all goes smoothly. We'll find out.
Jim, I did like your background better out there by the Cardinals.
I know my signal quality deteriorated pretty quickly out there, so I had to move indoors.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Wait.
Right. Well, are we all good? Can I go ahead and let folks in?
Yep. I'm gonna mute.
Welcome, folks. We'll get started in just a couple minutes, probably 1 or 2 after the hour. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started now that I have remembered how to use Zoom screen share appropriately. Welcome to the webinar today. We're really glad you're here. My name is Laurel Kays. I help manage the National FLN program along with our director, Emily Homan. Before we get started, I want to tell you just a quick bit about what we do at the national level to support all of the amazing work happening in our network, including all of what you're going to hear about today, although we certainly don't take credit for that. If I can get my PowerPoint to advance, which it doesn't seem to want to do. Well, we're just having technical difficulties all over the place today, aren't we? Can you still see the screen? Cool. All right. Hopefully we won't do that every slide. There's not that many. So just very briefly, through the National FLN program, we help support people like those you'll hear from today who are organizing collaboratives aimed at increasing the capacity and social license needed to build resilient ecosystems and human communities. We currently support 34 of these groups in 21 states, and it is also our national level 20th anniversary. And in that time, we have worked in 166 landscapes and leveraged over $84 million in funding. And PowerPoint is just not going to work for me today. So we are just going to quit with it. And I'll just say very briefly, we work closely with our sister networks, including the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, and the Prescribed Fire Training Exchange or TREX Coaches Network, particularly in a lot of places where that work overlaps. And finally, if you're interested in keeping up with us, including some of the work out of the South Central FLN you'll be hearing about today, you can sign up for the Networker, which is our newsletter. You can shoot a quick email to Liz Rank at lrank@tnc.org. She's also on the webinar today, so you can just shoot her a message if you want to keep up with us that way. So with that said, we'll cross our fingers for successful screen shares. That seems to be a bit of a problem today. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Marie, can you see your presentation up there?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much for being patient. All right, so with that said, we're gonna go ahead and transition to what y'all are here for, which is hearing from the South Central FLN about all of the great work they've been doing also over their 20 years. So they have chosen to record their presentations to avoid the tech issues, which clearly we are dealing with today. So I think that was probably a good call. So first, we're going to hear from McCree Anderson, and then we'll transition to the rest of our presentations, and then we'll have some discussion. As you hear these presentations, as you think of questions, go ahead and throw those in the chat box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. So with that, turn it over to McCree. And McCree, or anyone else, if you're not hearing the sound as this goes, wave at me and we will figure that out.
Welcome. My name is McCree Anderson, and I'm the director of our fire restoration program here in Arkansas and the lead on our fire learning network. You know, we've been working in this landscape for over 20 years to expand fire and forest restoration projects across Arkansas and beyond. Today, I want to share with you our journey, the one that we are on, the journey of how we got started, the barriers we faced, and tools we have used and are using to get us into the future. After 20 years, our journey seems to be only beginning. Yes, we've made some incredible progress, but as the world continues to change, we too must adapt and reflect on our core DNA from our partners and reflect on the vision that we have laid out for ourselves and the future. You know, designing for scale within the fire and forest programs, we've identified some factors for success. These factors have helped us on our journey. And there are many other types of factors that you might identify in your projects. But some of these are relevant across landscapes, defining the end game, making others care, partnerships, long-term commitment. These things are what I would consider our core DNA and helps drive our forest program and fire restoration programs into the future. You know, the first step is super crucial for us here in Arkansas, and I'm sure it is for you. The first step is making a statement to define ourselves and to our partners based upon the best available science of what our vision was, what the end game looks like. And for us, our vision was huge and still is. Is it attainable? I'm actually not sure, but we're trying really hard. But really, you know, the simple fact is our goal is to ensure over 3 million acres of open woodlands is restored and built into a resilient long-term ecosystem. You know, currently we have about 750,000 acres restored and in resilient landscapes. And, you know, to continue to do this work, we need to expand our fire program and basically double our fire program in the landscape. Can we do it? I don't know. We're going to work on it really hard. You know, our focus strategy is on key levers that will change the landscape for future generations. These levers are, you know, our fire program here in Arkansas, our burn crew, training, partnerships and demonstration landscapes, and outreach and messaging. These values help drive our future forest management. You know, when we first started, there was very little prescribed burning going on. We grew up with forests that we as scientists thought were normal, like this thick forest in the picture here, until they started dying at scale. And not just here in Arkansas, but across the West and Southwest as well. Everywhere, a forest type was being impacted by native insects and/or fires. You know, and this is a result of what our systems look like during that unhealthy stage. You know, these unhealthy forests showed up with the native insect taking advantage of a drought and super stressed trees. It was the native insect of the red oak borer. You know, also back in the dark ages, there was very little fire science going on. And in 2003, we had our very first local and regional fire history study published by local partners. And it was revolutionary. It showed fire had a significant impact historically, and that since 2019-21, you know, had been virtually no fire in the landscape. Incredible. You know, the science and its lessons form the backbone of our vision for the future. The question became, how do we use this knowledge to build a partnership to transform our landscapes using timber management and fire? Fire, a tool that hardly anyone uses, is a very controversial forest management tool, especially in hardwoods, not broadly understood by almost anyone, from the timber industry all the way up to environmental organizations, and land managers or the public, where very few people were trained to use it. It seemed crazy, but we felt we had no other choice but to figure it out. You know, so back then we went searching for a partner, you know, and found one who was alone in the world. You know, he was burning a small 300-acre pine oak woodland for quail habitat. You know, we were floored when we walked around. The landscape was diverse, open, and rural, just the right place to begin a demonstration project. You know, one of the core FLN traits is to develop science-based restoration for long-term impacts using short-term planning. So we formed a team, did a few workshops, developed some maps and work plans, and worked on a vision of the future, what it might look like, using local knowledge and expertise with this guy, Steve Osborne, from the Bayou Ranger District on the Ozark National Forest. You know, a few years went along and we had some success. People started seeing that the forest was more open, so we started to expand our vision. This map of the Ozark National Forest shows our restoration areas on the Bayou Ranger District circa 2005. We were moving from one project area with all of a sudden support of 5 more, totaling over 60,000 acres. We were on a roll. After that, we formed a local partnership. We called it a team. We did a 5-year strategy to tackle challenges, secure some funding, build a monitoring program, and increase political support. At the time, oak die-off and regeneration was the major political and ecological conservation problem to solve. And our role continued, but boy, did we have challenges. Challenges like no funding for the work, not much in the way of public perception of what logging operations and burning combined look like on the ground, in the fields, in the woods. Lots of challenges there. Lots of internal and external political pressures from the public and peers from seeing restoration You know, the work in the field, to be honest, is messy and unsightly. Leadership across the board was uncomfortable with the results and potentially some of the effects. So, you know, without years of monitoring data in hand, we just kind of had to say at the beginning, trust us for a year or so and let's figure it out. But then we got a few lucky breaks with a national award in 2005, some really good media and outreach that reduced some pressure. You know, we searched for ways to expand our impact. You know, this article reached 250,000 readers here in Arkansas. It made our case, and it was free. You know, a little later, you know, we continued to grow with new projects on new districts, with new people, you know, sharing the vision that we had for restoration across the landscape. You know, as the years progressed and partners across Arkansas began to embrace this work, we grew our 9-person quote team into the 80-person membership Ozark, Ouachita's Highlands collaboratives that we have today. Incredible. With the increases in funding and political and public support, partners across the landscape begin to increase their fire programs rapidly. An example of this will be discussed today from a good friend of mine, Randy Brents, from the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. We formulated a monitoring working group and began to build a fire program around monitoring that could be used for every partner agency working on restoration across the landscape. We planned countless tours across the landscape, you know, for everyone, and we fed them well. You know, and we had one goal, and the goal was for when people saw smoke in the air, for them not to immediately panic, and they understood what we were doing. You know, we documented our plans and placed them in highly visible places for everyone to see and understand. We did what we said we were going to do, so there was no surprises to our partners and the public. And now the scale is just incredible. You know, highlighted in red is where we have 3 or 4 funding mechanisms across 3 national forests in 2 states. You know, there's over $250 million annually coming into the forest restoration programs and over 300,000 acres under routine fire management. You know, with over 1 million acres to be treated in the next few years. For me, that's just unbelievable. And we continue to expand and seek new partners. In 2013, we led the Shortleaf Pine Initiative. You know, this initiative's goal is to stop the decline of shortleaf pine ecosystems across 23 states throughout the Southeast. It's an incredible opportunity to share the lessons learned from the ongoing work here in Arkansas to halt the decline of an ecosystem across multiple landscapes. You know, finally, I'd like to share a bit about what I discovered putting our history together. You know, highlighted here is kind of a timeline of all the things that I thought about in our journey. You know, and so first I'd like to highlight that, you know, things come in phases, and phases could be years in the making. Second, partnerships tend to have a life, but they can grow and expand if you continue to put yourself out there and seek new partners and opportunities. You know, third, good projects attract good partners, and everyone wants to be a part of something fun and inspiring and inclusive. And finally, we would not be here if it weren't today for the support of the Fire Learning Network. And I'm excited to see what the next 20 years holds for us. So thanks everybody for watching, and hope you have a good rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, McCree. As I pull up the next presentation, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat box. We'll go ahead and try and get to as many of them as we can at the end. Gabe, why don't you go ahead and pull up Jim's webinar? My computer has decided to freeze for a second.
Gotcha. I'll give that a try.
All right, thank you. Oh, wait, I've got it up. It's decided.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Greetings all. My name is Jim McCoy. I'm District Ranger for the Sycamore and St. Francis Ranger Districts on the Ozark-St. Francis National Forest. For starters, I just have to say, wow, Fire Learning Network, 20 years. That's a pretty remarkable milestone. It's one I didn't even realize was occurring because it's been part of my career pretty much for my entire career with the Forest Service. My time in contact with the concept goes back to my very first days as a wildlife biologist trainee and district ranger and district staff that were trying to do something different. And I think that was just very fortunately coupled with a TNC state chapter that was trying to do something different as well. And so all of that energy took us down a road that has literally affected my entire career and changed the way I think about natural resource management. So my personal history with Fire Learning Network goes back that far, you know, pretty much the entire Ozark National Forest Land and Resource Management Plan goes back that far with Fire Learning Network. Significant impact on the way we framed that plan, and to the good, to the collaboration, to the interdependence, all good stuff, really. Over the years, the successes that we've had with this notion of Fire Learning Network have been really manyfold. And just starting with one that's easy to count, acres. Acres treated has tripled, quadrupled, and more to the point, they aren't the same kinds of acres we were putting on the board before that. These acres are highly interdependent, and I mean internally they're highly interdependent. We've got timber shops and fire shops and wildlife shops and recreation shops all working together for the same outcomes, and those same outcomes have been deliberated with and oftentimes delivered in conjunction with strong partner support. And I mean partner support on the ground, dragging a torch with you, working on smoke management guidelines with you. Really tremendous change in the way we treat acres and then ultimately in the number of acres treated. Pretty phenomenal outcome. Another success that I would point to is the networking. It has expanded from small group of interested stakeholders, in some cases, many cases, very specific subject matter experts to a much wider base that don't even know necessarily that they're interacting with a fire learning network or a learned fire network. Multiple state agencies that perhaps never heard of it, indigenous populations that perhaps weren't familiar with many locations across the country. And I mean, just being real frank, a bunch of kids that came behind us and don't know that the way they're doing business is a direct result of what we framed up back then. It is just how we do business, and pretty strong ethic for networking and partnering came out of that effort. Another massive success has been the data we have collected out of this effort. what started with trying to develop a first-hand understanding of what we were actually accomplishing on the ground, those first-order fire effects, has through the iterations and through the years, despite the changes in people and despite the budget woes and ups and downs and the changes in initiatives, Joint Chiefs, CFLRP, all those shifts in the way we think about pushing to get business done on the ground, we've moved from first order fire effects to second, third, and higher level fire effects, the kind of data that affects forest plans and the kind of data that feeds into real collaborative landscape level district NEPA projects. And I'm very proud of that outcome, that we have collected enough data to actually say pretty close to darn sure we know what we're doing on the landscape collectively, and we're all pulling on the same rope. Another point that I'm extremely proud of, yet again, is the partnering and networking. Anytime you can stand on a partnership, on a network that reaches back 20 years, and you've developed a collaboration, a partnership with people that don't work in your geographic region, but are working through same problems as you. Nothing but strength comes from that. Nothing's in the closet. There's a lot of transparency. There's a lot of communal problem solving, and a real and truthfully strong relationship. And so if I had to close out with one thought left, it would be that 20 years, wow, the true strength that came out of the Fire Learning Network is that collaboration. And it really isn't a Fire Learning Network anymore. It truly is a network of the fire learned, I guess I would say. People that are changing hearts and minds and solving problems, and proud to be part of it. I'm proud to continue to be part of it, and really did change the ethos of land and resource management on the Ozark Plateau, and I know other areas as well. So that'll round me out, and I'll close out, and y'all have a good day.
Right, so thanks. That was Jim McCoy with the U.S. Forest Service. And next we're going to be hearing from Randy Brentz with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission.
I'm Randy Brentz with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and what I want to talk about today is a little bit about what the Fire Learning Network means for growth in the fire program, kind of where we came from, how some of the early FLN was incorporated into our program, how we've continued to build off of that, and where we are now. I started with the agency in 2014, so getting some of this back history, did a little bit of digging, but thanks to some others that have been able to piece together a brief history of our agency, and then we begin to tell our story about how the FLN has shaped in ways what we do. We can trace our burning history back to the 80s, where our prescribed fire efforts were sporadic and intermittent. But by the mid-90s, we had developed standards for minimum training, and then began to build into the late 90s with U.S. Forest Service agreements and the joining of the Arkansas Prescribed Fire Council. As we got into the early 2000s, equipment was being purchased, organization was forming, symposiums were shaping thoughts on burning and oak-dominated systems, and emphasis was being placed on woodland and glade restorations. This gets us up into early 2005, when the first FLN meeting was held to discuss ecological concepts, desired forest conditions, and other factors. Field tours were formed, homework assignments were given out, and other tasks were developed. Multiple grants were started with partners around this time. AGFC's first part-time fire crew was hired on and funded through the grants, and burning was being accomplished along with restoration efforts across the landscape. We can fast forward to 2014 when I was hired on. We've been able a little bit better to track our progress both from on the ground results and backing we received from agency leadership. In the first 2 years, we were able to standardize our efforts across the agency and form a prescribed fire implementation guide to lay the groundwork to be more organized and successful in our efforts. By the time 2016 arrived and the crew had received support to be funded outside of grants, staff was completing physical capacity tests, refreshers, utilizing landowner agreements to encompass private land acres in our work, and working toward defined roles in our agency and our fire program. Around that same time, we realized to be successful in achieving our prescribed fire goals, we had to have the necessary equipment to do so. The support from our administration allowed us to purchase 2 Type 6 engines for use in prescribed fire, multiple of these UTV skid units, and numerous other equipment and PPE needs. Additional equipment currently approved includes a KB4 blower to be UTV mounted and an Ignis aerial ignition system. To grow our fire program, we realized that March is not the only month to burn. We had to shift our thinking and think away from March and what other months of the year that fire would have burned in the landscape and take advantage of that larger burn window. And as you can see here, we shifted a lot of our burning into that July through December time frame, trying to get away from March so much. And it's still a heavy month. You can see the big peak there. But what we are doing is taking historically where we have burned 90% of our burns in that February to April time frame and start spreading that out later on in the growing season. But how do we get there? How do we get to this point that we are able to apply more fire on the landscape, not just on our state-owned WMAs, but on private lands and partners? What can't be lost in all that was the partnerships that were formed during the entire process. The goals developed in the initial FLN meetings were the catalyst that sort of sparked more intensive work and increased prescribed fire need. Those partnerships led to interagency burning, interagency training, monitoring, education, and other factors that garner support from inside and outside our agency. Anytime we're building a fire program, whether it be a state agency or federal, you have to have your leg to stand on. You have to have your science to point back to your defined goals that you're set out to achieve. The formation of the Arkansas Wildlife Action Plan defined the terrestrial habitats and discussed the importance of fire on these landscapes. Our WMA master plans define our species and management implications. Our prescriptions for our forested habitats outline forested needs to include fire. Everything is tied back to desired forest conditions and the role fire plays on the landscape. The Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has just a little under 400,000 acres across the state, and a lot of that is in bottomland hardwood forested habitats. So we don't have a lot of acres to impact our upland sites. We do rely on assisting our partners with their burns to help them accomplish their goals and do what we can on our landscapes. Just in the last 8 years, we've touched over 170,000 acres on state-owned WMAs and private lands, assisted partners over 190,000 acres prescribed fire. And in total, our staff has spent 136,000 hours on fire duties. We've been able to put fire on the landscape every month. And over time, we've seen just what we've been able to do increase. I've tried to keep this pretty short for the sake of time, but I will leave you with this image. This is one of my burn crew members from a few years back. And these signs that we have talk about our history without fire, that century. But if we can continue to apply it back to the landscape, I would like to think 100 years from now, these signs will hopefully read a century with fire.
Thanks, Randy. Now, finally, we're going to be hearing from Gabe DeYoung with TNC. And Gabe, you may want to go ahead and pull yours up.
All right, I'll give it a try.
Right. It's showing up fine.
All right, I'm gonna give it a try and let me know if you get the audio.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar today. My name is Gabe DeYoung, and I'm an ecologist with the Nature Conservancy in Arkansas. Today, I want to share with you how monitoring has been an important component of several large landscape restoration projects in the South Central Fire Learning Network. An incredible amount of work has been accomplished in this region to restore landscapes and ecosystems, primarily with fire in conjunction with timber management over the last 20 years. A key component of these projects has been the commitment on the part of a collaborative group of individuals, agencies, and organizations to learn while doing the work on the ground. Some of this learning came through monitoring of different forms, including first and second order fire effects. What I will share briefly with you today focuses mostly on long-term vegetation monitoring for second order fire effects. From the beginning, there were many reasons to incorporate monitoring into these fire restoration projects, but chief among them were: 1, it was seen by those involved as necessary. It had to be proved that the restoration actions were the right ones and that the desired results were achievable through them. The second reason was that there was uncertainty about outcomes. And when outcomes are uncertain, it makes sense to gather objective data and observations about what is happening on the ground, to be able to make comparisons between pretreatment condition and the desired future condition, and through that, be able to properly adjust the work on the ground if needed. Beginning in the early 2000s with the Oak Woodland Restoration Project on the Ozark St. Francis National Forest, there was a strong commitment among collaborators to learn along the way. The monitoring program that was set up in the Oak Woodlands Restoration Area established 127 vegetation monitoring plots covering hundreds of thousands of acres. This monitoring effort was later adopted as a model on landscape restoration projects on the Ouachita National Forest. The first of these projects was in Management Area 14, where the goal was to restore habitat diversity, particularly creating more open woodland, savanna, and early successional communities. This was done out of concern that the forest was too even in age and structure and was leading to losses of habitat diversity as well as plant and animal diversity, and ultimately raising concerns about resistance to and resilience in the face of many potential threats. The main treatments in this area were prescribed fire and timber management. Shortly after that project got started, the Ouachita National Forest began a collaborative landscape restoration project, this one focusing on restoring hundreds of thousands of acres of open shortleaf pine woodland in the pine bluestem ecosystem. And so the Ouachita National Forest and partners began burning and managing the timber in this area to restore pine bluestem for its incredible biodiversity and rare species, like the red cockaded woodpecker. And in the same way as before, the collaborative group of partners committed to monitoring the restoration. More recently, a landscape-scale glade and woodland restoration effort began on the Sylamore Ranger District on the Ozark St. Francis National Forest. This is often referred to as the Happy Bat Project. The treatments here involved thinning of eastern red cedar, treating non-native invasive species, and of course, reintroducing fire into the system. And once again, a group of partners came together to monitor those efforts in different ways. All projects combined, today we have 327 permanent macro plots set up for vegetation monitoring, and we have 3 transects set up on the Sylamore Ranger District on the Glade Restoration Project. And then we have hundreds of photo points scattered all over these areas, spanning both national forests in Arkansas and Oklahoma, and at least 6 ranger districts that I'm aware of. It's perhaps understating that it's been a big commitment, one that has required a lot of effort. And here we are. About 20 years have passed since we kicked off these restoration and monitoring efforts, and I think we've learned a lot. More than I can really summarize here in a few minutes in this presentation. But I will share some key takeaways because we are seeing many common themes and patterns arise among all of the monitoring results. First and foremost, fire is an absolute requirement to getting the desired results. Second, when fire is combined with timber management, such as overstory and midstory thinning, desired future conditions were achieved quicker than with fire alone. And three, when fire was not put on the ground or not put on the ground frequently enough, the desired results were not achieved. Over and over, we have seen rapid increases in total species richness, with most of the increase being in the herbaceous layer, those desired forbs and graminoids, like you see here in this figure. Taking a look at treatment effects on the herbaceous species diversity at the plot level, the pattern was as follows. Plots that had been thinned and burned at least once had the highest herbaceous species richness per plot, followed by plots that had been burned at least once but not thinned. And these treatments had more herbaceous species than both the plots that had been thinned but not burned and the untreated plots. Looking at the number of burns and the effect on the herbaceous layer, basically the pattern at this stage in the restoration is the more burns, the more you get. And with 2 or more burns, we are reaching our desired future condition of 15 or more herbaceous species per macroplot, nearly doubling the number of herbaceous species compared to unburned plots. Looking at the monitoring results for the Ouachita National Forest, the combined effect of fire and thinning on midstory tree basal area was as follows. Here we're looking at 2 different management areas on the Ouachita National Forest separately. Management Area 22 being the pine blue stem restoration area, and Management 14 the habitat diversity emphasis area. The desired future condition for midstory basal area is 10 square feet per acre, on average per plot. That's roughly 2 square meters per hectare for reference in this figure. You can see that on the pine blue stem, only those plots that were burned were meeting the desired future condition, while untreated and thinned only plots were well above the desired basal area. And the thinned only plots actually were further from the desired future condition than even the untreated plots. On Management Area 14, only those plots that were burned and thinned were meeting the desired future condition. One of the reasons we didn't see the burned-only plots performing as well in this management area compared to Management Area 22 is that overall there were fewer burns conducted and fewer plots burned more than once in Management Area 14. So that was just a little snippet of the monitoring results we've seen over the past 20 years. On a personal note, I just want to add, I feel very fortunate to have been involved with these monitoring efforts for the past 7 years. I came into my current role with the Nature Conservancy not having firsthand experience with fire effects monitoring. But after these years of collecting data, analyzing it, and sharing the results, I've seen the evidence both on the ground and I think uniquely through the veg monitoring. And I've come to see that fire is an incredible restoration tool that is critical to successful restoration in these ecosystems. Additionally, it's been incredible being part of a community committed to objective learning and adapting to achieve desired results. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to the discussion in our Q&A time.
All right. Thank you, Gabe, and thank you everyone for bearing through the technical difficulties. If all of our panelists can go ahead and turn your videos on, we'll get to some questions. As you think of questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. Quite a few folks included questions during registration, so we're going to start with those. Quite a few of you mentioned restoration through fire and getting to a desired future condition that is based on historic conditions. What resources are you using to determine what those historic conditions are and what you're aiming for in the future? And Gabe, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I can start addressing this question. So in this landscape, in this part of the world, we have several resources available to us that have allowed us to sort of recreate the historical vegetation in the landscape. I'll just point out two big ones. One, dendrochronology has really been a useful tool to recreate the fire history in the interior highlands. So that's looking at fire scars on old tree stumps and looking at the fire rings and then being able to recreate the fire history there. So looking back a couple hundred years. So that's a big one. Another one, we have records from early surveys that were done, the General Land Office surveys that began in the 1800s, documented a lot of the species that were present in Arkansas all over the state. And so we've been able to use some of that data that information that was collected to sort of recreate the historical vegetation in a lot of areas in Arkansas. So those are two big resources. Another, it was just honestly trying it. So we started restoring places or attempting to restore places, and we monitored the results. And so we saw the results on the ground, and early on, a lot of indications were that, you know, fire was definitely doing a lot of good in these landscapes. And so we had sort of these reference restoration areas already in place before we embarked on these larger landscape restoration projects.
Thanks. Anyone else want to chime in? Are you good with that?
I was just going to say that I think Gabe nailed it, especially with his last comment about, you know, just trying it. And so when you take all the science and you stack it in there and you try to replicate what you think was happening, and then that leads to what you think it looked like based on best available data, and you get there, it's a pretty compelling story.
Yeah, it's incredible. I would add too that, you know, this is actually the CD-ROM of the original GLO records that started it. And so people talk about GLO records. Well, we have them, and you can get them online now. I think you don't even have to have a CD, which I have still. The other thing remembered is the old, you know, some of these surveyors and folks that moved through the landscape and then documented it. So Henry Schoolcroft, Thomas Nuttall. And so we, in the book that Thomas Nuttall came through in 1835, you know, he describes the Ouachita Mountains, which we consider several million acres, 3 million acres of piney woods, as he described, you know, one area as, you know, 150 miles long of open park-like conditions under, you know, grass under these pine woods. So incredible descriptions back then of what Arkansas looked like 100 years ago.
Great. So Randy, you in particular talked about trying to move seasons of burn and diversify the seasons during which you're burning. What are the hardest operational elements in particular that you have to overcome when you're moving to those more growing seasons, summer, expanded burn times?
There's several things that can happen. I know your burn windows are a lot shorter. You don't have these big periods of dry air masses coming into the state where you're dry enough to burn. And you may get some of those weather-wise times where it looks like good burn days on paper, but you're dealing with fuel moistures that we're not dealing with in the dormant season. Everything's green. You're really having to wait for that stuff to drought and cure, and then have that weather with it as well. And then just the heat in general. I mean, you can't stay out there burning 10 hours like we do in the dormant season, because you have the safety issue of, are we keeping folks hydrated, or is it safe to be out there when it's 95 degrees and the humidity's 40% out in the middle of the sun all day? So there's a lot of factors to go into it. Personnel is going to be year round if you have enough personnel to carry fires out, but that time of year, it's really the heat, and then the curing of the fuels aligning with the weather as well that time of year.
You know, Laurel, to that, I would add that Arkansas Game and Fish Commission is kind of leading the way on this, you know, alternate season prescribed fire. And they're doing that because they're spot on with, you know, taking advantage of those fall windows, those late summer and fall windows. And on the federal side, there are 1,500 challenges to making that happen. Everything from this competing dual responsibility we have for fire suppression, largely in the western states, helicopter contract and availability, and just general resource availability. And then, you know, and you don't think of this automatically, but is it in the front of your brain? You know, is this a burn day, or do you wake up and, you know, you get to noon and you go, oh God, that was a burn day. So, you know, just having it on sort of the radar, I think is an important part of that.
And I'll add too that when you think of a burn day that time of year, you really have to change people's mindsets, because it's not March weather. It's not, you know, 90-degree day even in March where the humidity is going to be down 25 to 35%. You know, that time of year, you get humidities down in the mid 40s. I mean, if you're burning in open land systems, fire carry a lot of times in the mid 50s that time of year. It's just so hot and cured out. You don't need those humidity levels that you need in the dormant season to carry fire, if that makes sense. So you have to really kind of open your mind up to a whole new set of parameters that you aren't normally burning underneath in the dormant season.
Yeah, I'll add also that you know, growing season fire is a challenge on many levels, and that it's interesting how the fires tend to be less. They tend to be hotter and hotter. You know, hotter fire, hotter ambient air temperature, hotter on the personnel, that kind of thing. But then also it's less. It moves a lot slower actually, and it doesn't spot as much, and so it tends to be easier to manage, even though it's hotter. It's counterintuitive, but yeah.
I'll just add too, I think we're gonna, and we're probably, a lot of the people actively implementing fire already see this, that are doing it in the late growing season. We're probably going to have to adjust our view of what good fire is in that seasonality. One thing in particular is being okay with lower coverage than we're used to, because of all that greened up vegetation, holding a lot of moisture. These burns, at least from what we've observed a lot recently, are patchier. And so we're not going to just have entirely black units, but I think that's okay. And that's something that the monitoring is going to take some time to catch up with what we're already doing on the ground, but we're going to be monitoring, you know, our summer burns as well, because there's a lot of interest in some of the beneficial effects we could get with that seasonality.
I agree, Gabe. It's definitely a lot patchier. If you're burning, especially in timber stands, it's going to fall a lot around the stand. When you get in those oak systems where it's 100% shade, it's going to burn around that shade a lot of times, and not burn in it. But from a forest management perspective, managing for different responses across the stand, I think it's great, because it's creating that variability across the landscape. And then from a wildlife perspective, you know, that burned, unburned out there for ground nesting species and poult rearing for turkey. I mean, you name it, they're not encountering thousands of acres of black. They're encountering patches of habitat intermixed. And so you end up with this matrix of response out there that you don't normally get in the dormant season.
So we have a question from Brad, a couple of questions. So I'll start with the first one. He's interested in thoughts and suggestions as to how to better prepare to effectively scale up implementation of prescribed fire. So McCree, I think you kind of got at this with that phases timeline that you showed. Kind of how do you plan to do that? What funding sources do you seek out, especially now that there are some of these other funding sources that maybe there weren't when y'all were just getting started?
Yeah, it's private landowner management is complex, as everybody knows. It's a really good question. I think that's from Brad Garner. So thanks, Brad, for the question. You guys are better positioned to help figure it out than I am. But basically, I remember a landowner incentive program we did years ago. That was a good start. Maybe has a good model on that. I could go for hours on challenges with private landowner at scale type restoration work, but Randy might have some ideas too. And I'll be happy to follow up with you later, Brad.
I think McCree hit on some of it. Some of those landowner incentive programs have been really great. I think we all know that. I mean, look at EQIP and CSP, those programs that, you know, are cost share programs for landowners to do things like install fire lines and implement fire. The issue is, and it's going to stay that way for the term, I think, because all these landowners are small landowners. We all know that too. They own, their grandpa's 40, they got 10 acres or 5 acres. There's not that many landowners have large scale, thousands of acres of property that you can go in and manage on a large scale like we can in the National Forest or some of our larger WMAs. We have to continue to do work through the Fire Council and with partners to continue to get those landowners in those programs and continue to get fire on those landscapes, and then try to link those landowners with the landowner next to them. You know, can that landowner talk to that landowner? Can we talk to that landowner and get them to join their property with theirs? You know, we try to do some of that. Forest Service does it, burning private lands inside the forest and adjacent to the forest. We try to loop landowners in next to WMAs and uneven holdings. We just got to keep making those contacts, get the people on the ground out there, and keep burning and keep getting our message out there why it's good for the landscape to have the fire out there.
You know, I'd add, Brad, that if you've got 1,000 acres, you probably don't need or want our help to burn your acres. So Randy's spot on. You know, it's the landowners with 10, 15, 40 acres. That's where the growth edge is, I think, with private landowner prescribed burning. I don't think there's any magic recipe. Money flows to good partnerships and good relationships. Anytime you find high trust, that is something that people want to invest in. And I think if that's something we desire to lean forward into, then we need to start talking now. We need to start talking about those, the instrumentations, the partnership agreements that allow us to move money back and forth between agencies. To address some of the very real capacity issues that each agency has on the ground, and some of the very real authority issues that each agency has on the ground, so that we can pull together something that looks like more of an all hands approach to making it happen. Now.
Yeah, I would also add just one point that, it's not very economically viable to do a bunch of small acres. And so there's going to have to be some kind of an additional incentive to get contractors in the system and more burn crews. So anyways, lots to figure out.
So that feeds a little bit into Brad's next question, and one we got to in the registration questions are kind of about what obstacles and challenges or limiting factors y'all are seeing in Arkansas right now to ramping up, to continuing your success, to continuing to grow. What are the things that you're working on overcoming or seeing in the future?
I'll
gonna
just go
start.
ahead, Jim.
McCree, yeah, sorry. I just start by, during the spring season, we're all booked. And so really the only thing that changes that is, adding some capacity, more crews, like McCree's talking about, and maybe some key equipment procurements, things that add to our capacity, make the boots go a little bit farther, so to speak. I think drones are a good thing. I'm very happy to see Randy has dived off into those waters. Blending it, going into the growing season, into that summer and fall season, I think it is just a foregone conclusion that with the state of the national wildfire situation, the U.S. Forest Service and most of the federal partners our options are going to be very limited. Our resources get stretched very thin. And by the time you've marched through a spring prescribed fire season, you pull together maybe a couple of classes for the Arkansas, Oklahoma Wildland Fire Academy, and then bam, you're immediately into Western fire season. And, on my district alone, and I'm not special, when you've got folks going on 4 or 5 2-week fire assignments throughout the summer and they've missed their families, they've missed the entire summer, they're fighting fire, they're tired. And so when you start looking at setting fire on a 96-degree day, they're physically and emotionally drained, and they're kind of ready for Christmas at that point. Without saying, I don't know how else to say it. So we flexing into that, what is a real ecological growth opportunity for late summer, fall, even dormant season burning, is a massive challenge for us, like capacity wise.
Yeah, I'd say a major obstacle is actually we're at record number of acres treated annually now the last few years. But at the same time, our public is also growing exponentially. And so we have not done a good job of making sure that we're staying up to date with public education and outreach and getting the message out there, because there's a lot of smoke in the air in the spring and a lot of new people in Arkansas.
And I'll let Randy, you jump in just 1 second. I'm happy to stay on for a couple extra minutes, finish this question and finish out the 1 or 2 we have left, but I want to respect folks' time for those who do have to jump off. If that's you, then thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. There's a quick webinar evaluation, just one question you really only have to answer. This stuff really helps us improve things and justify these sort of programs. So thank you for those who have to jump off. If you don't mind taking the eval, that would be great. And Randy, sorry about cutting you off. Go ahead.
You're fine. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Jim said. I mean, when we have burn days, in that what we call the typical fire season we have, where we start shifting a lot of our burning, we're burning it. We're trying to burn every day we can. If we've got 2 or 3 burns running on a district or on WMAs and everybody's tied up doing those burns, there's still burns out there that could be getting done that day. We just don't have the capacity to complete them that day. So on these larger landscapes, a lot of times that's what holds you back more than anything, is not having, you've got 7 burn units on a WMA or 7 burn units on a district, and you got enough people to run 2. You could run 7 if you had another 30 people or whatever many you need. So some of that's going to be limited by personnel. I mean, weather's just a limiting factor sometimes, but I think we got to continue to maintain those MOUs and stuff that we've done to where we can help each other. I mean, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. All of us try to send, if TNC needs help or Game Fish needs help or Forest Service needs help or Quail Forever, the Arkansas Forestry Division. I mean, there's so much trading resources back and forth that goes on. We're going to continue to do that. If all of us can maybe just increase our capacity a little bit, collectively, it would equal a lot.
Yeah. So do y'all have time to stay on? We've got 2 more questions I think it would be great to get to. Are we all good? Cool. So this one may be a little bit difficult, but do you guys have any particularly those of you who have been involved for a long time, are there any regrets or things that you just wish you had done a little differently or done a little bit earlier, looking back? And obviously hindsight is 2020, we're all Monday morning quarterbacking here, but as you look back, are there any things that you wish you had done differently?
I have one. I wish I had, this idea only came to me maybe 6 months ago, and I don't know if it has wings or not, but the ethos for the future of resource management is collaboration. It is, cross agencies, cross boundaries, all lands. The public, and that makes sense. The public does not care what color uniform you're wearing. The wildlife, the rare plants darn sure don't care. They just want the habitat. They want the hunting opportunities, the recreational opportunities. We want the healthy ecosystems. We're all pulling on that same road, and yet we are slightly encumbered by this constant need to install, renew, update all of these various partnership agreements that we have, whether they're money, we just have a ton of agreements, MOUs, formal partnership agreements that we have to go back and forth with. And it just seems to make more sense to me that if this is how we're going to do business, I wish we had started 20 years ago with codifying these relationships, making the authorities that, get handed down to us from legislation, putting those in place as code. This is how we do business. We don't have to have a special partnership agreement in place to do this thing. I don't need a special authority to go help the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission on a day when they're shorthanded burning on a WMA. And they don't need any kind of special authority. We just have the instrumentation codified and in place to move money and resources back and forth, to move, all of the things that we need to pull this off collectively back and forth seamlessly. And if we had started on that 20 years ago, getting this in code, getting this in legislation, I think as a good idea, I think we'd be a lot farther down the road than where we are today.
I'll just say that I think I've learned a lot about what the meaning of restoration is, and it's fluid. And when a long time ago, I used to think, it's open woods, it's perfect condition, it's a steady state of perfect, and that really isn't true. There's a lot of diversity and really good stuff out there, and it doesn't have to look good, and restoration is a process, and it's not a state of being.
Thanks. So just one more, and this one's pretty straightforward, I think. Considering all of the recent interest in white oaks, what type of research do you know of that's available on the prescribed fire interactions with that species?
Well, I'm not going to punt this entirely, hopefully, but there's a lot of research out there. As you said, there's a lot of interest in the response of the white oaks in particular to burning. In this landscape, I'm just going to point you to a good resource. The Oak Fire Science, the Oak Woodlands and Forest Fire Consortium is a good place to find a lot of information. They put out a lot of summaries of the latest research in these landscapes on fire and fire effects, and I'm sure either they have a lot of the research outlined or linked to on their website, which is oakfirescience.com. They can also, I would encourage you, if you're interested in that type of research in particular, to reach out to them, and they would be able to point you to a lot of the more recent research on that topic.
Yeah, and I linked them in the chat box for those interested. I'll also add the Fuel and Collaboration series, which I think the Oak Fire Science folks are a partner on, did a really interesting webinar in their most recent season about hardwoods and prescribed fire And I think a lot of the stuff they were talking about was sort of Kentucky, Tennessee centered, but some really interesting findings about the prescribed fire timber interactions there as well. So with that, that's all the questions we have. And I know we went a little over time anyway, but I'll just give y'all one last chance. If you have anything, last thoughts you wanted to share, or anything you want to wrap up, I'll give y'all the last word.
Thank you for coming. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone. That's my last word. Appreciate the opportunity.
That sounds
It was a real pleasure, and I hope to be around for the 40 year.
that's right.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
back and pull you out of retirement if needed. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. This recording will be posted up on our Conservation Gateway site as soon as we have it ready. So thanks again. If you don't mind taking that quick eval, that would be great, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.